Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic, examining esoterica. Hey, rough edit alert, guys. I accidentally used the intro for my YouTube channel when I opened up my podcast. And so there's going to be a cut to the actual podcast here. Particularly if you're watching the video version, you're going to be like, what's about to happen? Welcome to Logical Magic, examining esoterica. Today we're going to be talking about the long dark night of the soul. Back to the real recording. Hey guys, today we are talking about how to survive the long dark night of the soul. Now it's a spiritual concept, and I'm going to be going into the history of it, the stages of it, how it feels, how to get through it, how long it lasts, what it really is here to help you do. Because it is a concept in spirituality. And part of what I do in the concept of examining esoterica is to take these well-known phrases and construct and things that we have been relying upon in the spirituality community, in some cases for centuries. The long dark night of the soul actually originated with Saint John of the Cross, who was a Spanish mystic, and it was written in the 16th century, although I don't think they have an exact date on it, and it was not actually entitled at the time. It was entitled afterwards, and it was based on the contents, what the title became. And it really is about the idea of something in your life coming along. It can be a death, it can be a divorce, it can be a life-changing event or decision that triggers a process in your life that will either be a crisis of faith or it will be a crisis of self that helps lead towards ego death. Which ego death in spirituality is a very important concept. Now, before I start breaking all this stuff down, I'm going to put my housekeeping at the top of the podcast where I've been told it needs to go. If you want to book me for a private reading or a life coaching session to help you figure out your own path going forward, you can do so at therisingmoon.com. And that is the only way to book me. Please be aware that almost all people in the spirituality community end up being cloned by scammers, and that none of the reputable readers will actually ever approach you in comments or trying to sell you readings without you reaching out first. So keep that part in mind. I have a YouTube channel called Cronecast at the Rising Moon. You can find pick-a-cards that I do there. And there's pick-a-cards on what chakras do you need to heal, how to help heal your sexual trauma, as a for instance. So I do highly recommend them. And you can find that at Cronecast at the Rising Moon. And I have a Patreon coming up. It's not going to be for a little bit, but it will have some things like guided meditations to help get you through things like anger and fear and grief, and to help people, particularly with trauma disorders, process their feelings, which is part of the long dark night of the soul. And we're circling back to today's topic. I also kind of have to learn how to pause at intervals here, as I'm also preparing the podcast for a structure that will support commercials, because everybody's got to eat, and that includes me. So I have to monetize in the ways that will cost you the least, but will help make sure that the lights stay on around here and everybody gets fed. So let's start talking about the long dark night of the soul and what it is and what it isn't. It can be a very depressive period. And I need to urge everybody here that when we're talking about these ancient constructs, because something that has been around since the 16th century was created in a world where life, although people don't really change that much, our emotional construction, a lot of the time, things like spiritual connection or a personal happiness or a feeling of purpose within one's life, these are very both modern and ancient constructs, meaning that it held a higher it's at a higher place in what is likely to be in our consciousness in a world that supports most basic needs. And when most of these were written, when most of these things like karma, which I just did a podcast on karma with Jacob and re-examining it to understand better what it is not rewards and it is not punishments. And I will go very deeply into that in that episode that's coming out in a couple of weeks, I think. But when we're re-examining things, it is because survival was something that was always in question at the time that this was written, that this concept was brought to the fore, where famines were very common, that whether or not you had a good harvest very much determined what sort of year you would have, down to basics like food and shelter, and what we were at the whim of the elements in a way that, frankly, we're in many ways returning to, but it was very pronounced then. Survival and keeping body and soul together was at the root of most people's existences. And it was the reason that they were able to have faith and accept things in this very fanciful narrative that most religions present without many questions, because they needed something to believe in to get them through their very harsh existences. As our existences are more about survival in a monetary sense and what we, what stuff we do and don't have, most people hearing this are not in a fight for survival in the way that they were at the time that many of these constructs were put forth. Meaning that although there are wars within this land at this particular time in this world, if you're listening to this, you are not likely being bombed right at this particular moment, etc. Meaning that your ability to feel connected to your life is less about that drive to stay alive and more about the drive to find meaning within the life that you are living. And because survival is more of a given in a societal structure that has been around for a while and with modern day advances, that the concept of whether or not people are happy with their existences and what they're meant to be doing with it has come to the fore more. And so we're doing a little bit of an update on what the long dark night of the soul is, because it is part of a spiritual journey. And it is difficult. And how does it start? Usually it starts with a feeling of connection, that discovery of a feeling of something being beyond yourself. And it can be very blissful, and it doesn't last long. That bliss of feeling connected, that, oh my gosh, there is something behind all of this. There is a consciousness. There is meaning. There is purpose. I'm not truly alone. There is a divine figure. And I'm not talking about the gods of religion, which, again, religion is a man-made structure seeking to harness the power of what the divine is and to define it for people in a way that allows that religion to then control those people to get either the taxes out of them that they might want, like the tithing that goes on, or any of the other things that are about pushing people's buttons, almost like they're a computer, to program them to get the output that either that power structure or a society wants. Now, that can sound like I'm just slamming on the concept. I'm not. At the time that these began, oh my gosh, did we need structure because of the aforementioned fight for survival that was the human existence. We desperately needed some way to control people who, with backs against the wall, might start engaging in, like, I'm going to have to kill you for your dinner because I am hungry. And so that's part of the reason that so many religious structures are so fearful and threatening eternal damnation. And is there something like eternal damnation? In a way, yes, weirdly, but it's not like there's no like devils and pitchforks. What there really is coming back into an energy over and over again until you lighten that load, which is actually what karma is. And again, different podcast. Let's get back to the long dark night of the soul and how to survive it, because so many people have been in it following COVID. And it's that simple. There is always a catalyst. There is always an event that has people start to examine this world, their existence, and their place in this existence. And because there was a global event, many people were plunged into a form of the long dark night of the soul at the beginning of lockdown, when they were separated, because part of the long dark night of the soul is isolation. It is, you're likely feeling very isolated from your life, from others, from connection. You may have been very disappointed in relationships because another catalyst event, another inciting event can be a breakup. It's very often found in death as well, the death of a person, and then perhaps finding out more about them in the aftermath. Things that you didn't know can always be very disorienting. And in fact, first comes shock, and the stages that are known: shock, and the next is disorientation, and the next is letting go. Now, letting go is not quite the same thing as surrender. Letting go is a processing stage in which you begin to feel all of the emotions that you have been repressing. Trauma survivors are aces at repressing emotion, but everybody has to do so because we all have a persona that we present as we walk through the world. And so we, in order to be perceived, to get the feedback that we want, most people hold up this construct, and it is deeply related to ego and caring very deeply what others think of you, but it is also societally encouraged. So let yourself off the hook for that. But in the letting go process for the long dark night of the soul, many of those emotions will rise up, and you'll have to process them and understand them. And the key to the letting go process is understanding how to begin to see yourself, not simply from your internal view, but rather from a greater view. And it is called ego death. And it is, as Aziz put it in the yoga podcast, learning about self with the lowercase instead of the uppercase, where self and who you are being deeply influenced by the energies and the constructs around you and the controlling power structures. You are only partially who you believe yourself to be. And the other part of you is a set of programmed beliefs and responses. And it is part of the reason that in the stage of letting go, we begin to understand that judging others is a counterproductive thing, because you can never truly know what their intent is. When we judge ourselves by our intent. When we judge others, we have a tendency to judge them by their actions. And here's the thing, again, most of those actions are program responses. And so even for instance, even though racism is one of the worst things in society after society, and unfortunately, it really is a global thing. We suffer from it terribly in the United States because of slavery at the beginning of the United States, where we were a society that considered it okay to own people. And many of our infrastructures were built by people with less and less, even after the end of slavery. And so most of what makes life possible for people, and this is a societally encouraged thing to ignore it, but it's because it's a global problem. I've studied world history, I've studied ancient history, I'm a big history fan, and nothing we're doing right now is new. If you look at Russia, there was serfdom well into the late 18th century, I believe. Yes, late 18th century. Where people had no autonomy. They really were considered almost the possessions of those with more. And we have returned to a structure very much like that. And these are the problems that we have to solve in order to evolve as a society. And it starts with ego death, and it starts accepting that the idea of self, everything that you see from an insular view, if you are always wondering why somebody did something to you or hurt you, it is likely because you're seeing it only from your viewpoint and not understanding that that's where they were too when they did whatever it was that they hurt you. That is the truth of why somebody did something almost always. They were not thinking about what it would do to you, as you, when you process your pain, are doing. They're seeing their life from an insular view. And that is not to shame you on any level. Oh my God, it can hurt so much. But the path out of that pain is to begin to understand, I need to let this go. And the way to let it go is to begin to understand that it was never really about you, that person was flailing around in their own pain, in their own confusion, in their own darkness, and that they just hurt people around them through a lack of understanding of self. And that is really at the root of almost all transgressions that people might commit against us and that we have committed against others. And that is the stage in letting go in order to facilitate and accelerate the process of processing the negative emotions and releasing them, to purify your energy, because that is what the long dark night of the soul really is about, is a stage of purification where you rid yourself of your baser instincts, of your insular view, where you begin to try and connect to a universal energy, to the idea of, and please stop thinking about God in the way you have had it defined by religions, and instead think of a uniting divine force, that it does not look like us or act like us, because it is something that we all have access to, but exists outside of our form. And that is the easiest way I have of explaining it. But there are beautiful narratives that help us approach it with a level of understanding, and that we all possess a universal energy, and we all possess part of that divine energy. When we talk about trying to define the divine, the place you will find it is within. And that is the point of the long dark night of the soul, is that it isolates you in your darkness and your pain and your confusion until you find acceptance of your journey so that you can make progress on it. Because when you're trapped with yourself, when you're trapped with your feelings, when you're trapped with your pain, either you confront it or you medicate it away. And we live in a society that causes us to medicate with stuff, with substances, with relationships, which is what codependency is, and something I've been very, very guilty of. I've gone a little bit into like just how much abuse I suffered as a child, and into essentially my late adolescence, quite frankly. There's something called an ACE score. My personal score is a 9, and it's 1 through 10, with 10 being the highest, that like the most abuse that you can basically withstand. And it's very difficult to be a functional person when you get up above like 7 or so. And so I know I'm very, very fortunate. And reality is that I should be a 10, because multiple things that happen to me are not contained in that diagnostic tool, which include multiple traumatic and sudden deaths, which has been a part of my existence as well. Particularly lots and lots of abandonment, up to and including sudden deaths, freakishly, like some of them were downright, whoa, what happened there? But there were a lot of them. And understanding that led to me being very, very like needing to work very hard to heal myself, because it was a lot. Whenever like I was in therapy in my 20s, I've not really returned to therapy on any real level after that, because it's very rare to have the strange combination that I have. And when I chuckle like that, please remember that is a trauma response. It's not that I'm laughing at any of this. People who are trained always spot it for what it is. It's like you're just bumping into something that's painful right there. It's like, yeah. And like I learned how to laugh instead of to cry, or to wince, or to show any pain. That's the process of letting go, though, is the acceptance that what was in your journey is not a judgment against you, and that everyone around you suffers so much in ways that you won't get to know. Because again, when you're judging somebody, you're judging them by their actions, not their intent, or by what their journey has contained. And what I have had to accept is, even though I have this like enormous score that like makes people flinch, and I'm to this day, I don't talk about the specifics very often, because I found it to be very upsetting for people. And so I learned not to talk about it. And I began talking about it when I started my YouTube channel and my business, because I realized so many people had a backstory that they were also hiding for the comfort of others, which meant that it was very difficult for them to look at it if they had been schooled to be ashamed of it. So this is why I talk about it to this day. And in the long, dark night of the soul, the acceptance part that aids the processing and the letting go, is quite simply understanding we are all challenged. And I began to look at the world, and this is a tool that you can use as well to help get yourself out of this, is to first understand that there are highs and lows in life, and that unfortunately struggle is a part of this existence, that it is difficult, but it is how we learn, and it is how we strengthen ourselves. And that is not I do not like that. God will never give you more than you can handle. Many, many people have had more than they can handle, and they become drug addicts, and they become drunks, and they become people who truly struggle because they could not heal, they had to choose to medicate. And we have very few healing tools available. And it's part of the reason that even though I'm talking about Patreons and setting up things to try and make sure I can monetize this experience a little bit more for me without it being much cost to the people who are listening to me, because it appalls me at a very deep level that the healing tools that are available are only really available to people who can pay for it. So I try to make sure that people have access to as many things that are free as humanly possible. Having said that, everybody deserves to make a living. And so I will have to turn my head towards trying to make sure that I monetize in the ways that are available to me that will cost the people I'm trying to help the least, but make sure that I keep body and soul together. Circling back to acceptance, though, acceptance is understanding that no matter how much pain you're in, nothing is trying to hurt you. That it is just part of the experience that we come here and have. And that part of the letting go stage is understanding everything can pass if we make what we are focusing on, allowing it to pass, not repressing it. In order for something to pass, it must be processed. Like there's a couple of gross analogies I can use with bodily functions, but let's not. This is what we're talking about with things passing through you. First, they have to be digested. and they have to be processed. And when you do that, then you can let them go. Understanding what my bum childhood did to me and understanding that I'm a very understandable result of a lot of trauma gave me the ability both to forgive myself and then to forgive others, and then to embrace the idea that, oh my gosh, everybody's in so much pain. And we have a way out of it if we begin to try and care for others and care for self. But it does begin in isolation, where you are forced, as part of a spiritual journey, to simply be with yourself, to confront yourself. And if you try to medicate it away with things like relationships, they will likely escalate to a level of toxicity at a much quicker rate than they did when you were younger, by the way. Because there are stages, and it can be a Saturn return. If you are very dedicated to astrology, there are 2 Saturn returns in a person's life, and one's at between the ages of 27 and 29, I believe, and the next one is in between the ages of 57 and 59. And there can be an exact date for yours, but it is when you enter a new stage of life, and that is the point of the long dark night of the soul, is it is allowing the formative version of self. Because when we are children, in that formative experience that can have so much sway over who we are as we go forward, when we are children, we see things from that insular view, from that, this is hurting me, I only know my own feelings. You have a harder time seeing outside of each other, outside yourself. Although some people are schooled, particularly women in this particular society, to think first of others always, which means that you don't get to understand yourself. And by the way, when you do that, when you're self-sacrificing at a societal and a systemic level, that really teaches the people that you're sacrificing for that you view yourself as a lesser form of life, that you are not treating yourself as being equally important. There is this middle ground between centered on self, centered on others, and being able to understand that I am as important as the people around me, but they too are important. And that is part of the acceptance, is understanding that no matter how much journey has hurt, and no matter how angry you might be about it, because that is part of the processing and letting go, is we will all have anger around the way we were treated, or the misfortunes, or the struggles, or the obstacles that were placed in our path. And we have a tendency to do this as we process our feelings, as we're stuck in them, is we will look to people who appear to have a life that's much better and wonder, why didn't I get that? And here's the key to opening the door to healing. Stop looking at those people. You don't know how their life feels. I read for them a lot, and it doesn't feel the way that you think it does. There's as much pain and confusion and hurt. There's just more stuff and greater fear around losing stuff, which I experienced personally. I grew up just desperately poor. But I was not poor when I was married to my ex-husband, who was, a very, he had a job that this type of world encourages, and I experienced a lot of material comfort. I'm grateful for that. It was fun. I'd love to get back to it at a certain point in my life again. I was saying on the Karma podcast is that, I got to take these Regent Seven Seas cruises, and they were beautiful and they were wonderful, but I spent the entire time talking to the staff because the guests I just didn't have much in common with. But what I did find is that when you have more, there's a greater fear of losing it. That fear actually increases the more that you have. That I was in many ways less worried about the future when I had less. I've had to retrain my brain to reclaim that part of myself, to just relax into the idea that even though we make the biggest darn deal in the world about money, it has a tendency to kind of come and go. And in my life, it comes when I need it. And I've been very fortunate in that. And I do magic, but my magic focuses on healing and helping, and it's celestial and angelic magic, and it can't be used for baneful purposes. That is not to say that I never did any different forms of magic. I have, and I can still do money magic and things sometimes. But the focus of what I use celestial and angelic magic for is to help heal people and remove their attachments, which is part of the letting go process. Because to every negative emotion that we have, there are energetic beings that are attracted that will try and increase it. Anyone who's ever been depressed knows that it feels like it has a life of its own. Same thing with anxiety. Same thing with anger. Is that it's this weird, big, monstrous thing when you're repressing a lot of emotions around it, and it becomes something that comes and goes when you have achieved the letting go process. And so talking to yourself, this is a tool that will help even when you're going through it, when you're angry, when you're sad, when you're miserable. Keep telling yourself, everything in life will change if I let it. And that's not to say you will get the Disney dream or something, but rather this feeling that feels so overwhelming, that feels so potent, that feels so all-defining, it will pass. A different mood will come, a different moment will come, a different set of inputs will come, and I will experience a different feeling. I don't need to be afraid of this, even though it sucks. Just let yourself feel it and get yourself through it. There's a proviso with this. Because I just talked about attachments, there is a chemical switch in your brain that can turn you towards imbalance. And this is where my whole, I obviously really dig science too, comes in. Please don't be afraid of Western medicine and psychiatric drugs. They have changed the world entirely and made life possible in a way, because trauma does change your brain, but so do some people have a genetic predisposition towards chemical imbalance or mental illness. And destigmatizing any shame around that is one of the things that I really am very dedicated to, because we do not shame people for most physical ailments. Now, I used to say all, but like, we got all kinds of problems with judging, like how people eat or what they weigh or how they spend their money, or like we really invest a great deal of our energy turning our feelings outward instead of turning them inward to understand them. That is part of the long dark night of the soul and ego death. And why do you want to do this? Because I got through it, and I can tell you something that is true for absolutely everybody that I know. You will feel so much more peaceful. Your happiness will feel so much more resonant and deep when it is not, when you know that it is contained in a moment, and you will savor the moment, where you don't try to make your whole life about arriving at a destination where you will have everything that you want, because you won't get to that point. Nobody gets everything that they want. Even if they appear to you, they don't. And that key that I was trying to tell you about is stop comparing yourself to people with more, and instead look once more to people with less, and to understand how blessed you are compared to them, and that they're not doing anything to deserve their misfortune. Neither are you. But that this life is not really about deserving as much as it is about understanding, overcoming, and accessing the best that we can be, which is the next stage in this. So we've got shock, disorientation, letting go, which is the processing, acceptance, which is everything that we've just talked about. And that's humility. Is if you look at things about, but billionaires, but rich people, but this person, the way they look, the way they dress, the what they have, and you are saying, I don't have that, so I'm afflicted. The key to feeling better in your life is to go through your life and go, you know what? I woke up in this really comfortable bed. There are people who are sleeping in their cars because they don't have any other choice. I woke up and I got what I wanted to eat out of the refrigerator, or I drank my morning coffee and it was delightful. I put a beautiful flavored creamer in it. All of these things are true boons and blessings in your life. And if you will look at them that way, you will feel it that way. So I'm going to try and pause here for a second because I need to get better at it. I'm not, structure is hard when you channel a great deal. But again, if I want to make it possible to help other people as much as I wish to, I have to be smart about what I'm doing. And after humility, when you begin to understand that we are all one, and that we all sometimes have allergies, in case you're watching the video version on my YouTube channel. I'm well known for having to wipe my nose a lot. I'm mildly allergic to one of my dogs. But I love him, so what am I going to do? Comes reconnection. And reconnection is when you stop resenting your journey and you start learning from it. That is the part that is the hardest part about the long dark night of the soul, is to start looking about the role you have played, the small s in that self, in what has occurred in your life. Meaning, did you maybe, as using me as a for instance, because that way nobody else feels hurt, my choice in partners is atrocious. It was like I've currently just been like hanging out by myself, learning to really love being single. And my God, it's so fun. Like I cannot recommend it anywhere near enough to anybody who is listening, is that if you want to be happier, be by yourself until you're used to it and you get happy. Because I'm a naturally happy person. It's a little bit weird because I have these big everythings, but I'm not naturally a sad person. I'm naturally kind of like I like silly things and I feel pretty happy easily. And when I started to find that being by myself, you know what it did for me is it made it almost a guarantee. I would never accept the wrong person nor think the wrong person was right for me ever again, because I am perfectly happy by myself. Are there things I wish would improve in life? Yes, but I'm on that path. All we can do is what we can do, and all that we get is the day that we have in this very moment. Find the things in it that will make you happy. Stop expecting it to come and get you and look to see it. And that will begin to alleviate the process. And know, by the way, that as Jacob is always saying, it's not a linear journey. It's not. You will have setbacks sometimes. Because I have enough trauma to make therapists gasps. Like, honest to goodness, sometimes the look on like a really trained person's face when we get into like I said, it's an A score of 9, but it should be 10. Because I have a form of trauma repeatedly that again is not represented in that list. The only thing that I can do about that is to learn from it, to understand what it did to me, to get a different outcome. And that is what the point of the long dark night of the soul is. And the keys to surviving it is to begin talking to yourself about that, is to begin understanding this serves a purpose. Even though I feel like crap and it's horrible and it feels like it will never end, it will. And it will if I do the work to make myself feel better, to take care of myself, to give all of the love that I might be trying to give to another person and give it to me. And some people call it reparenting. I've never liked the terms inner child healing or reparenting because it sounds so reductive and makes people feel like they're childish rather than kind of caring for their emotional core, which is what it really is. When you're practicing real self-care, you don't judge yourself for being afraid. You just ask yourself, why am I afraid? What am I really afraid of? What's it really reminding me of? And when you really have processed all that repressed emotion, and how long does this last? It can last for years. And that is not to intimidate nor frighten you. It's just saying, if you've been in it for a while, just understand that the more work you put in on it, the more the journey will accelerate. But that if you solely drive for what you want, then you will slow your process down, because the entire point of the long dark night of the soul is to help you achieve ego death, to understand that your life's goal is not to drive forward towards what you want, but to appreciate what you have and to try and do things in your life, whether it is your profession, whether it is your hobby or your family or whatever it might be, that give you a feeling of connection to others, which is called integration. And that's the integration with others and with self, accepting your inner dichotomy, which, like, there's always going to be a part of us that is fallible, a part of us that envies, a part of us that rages, a part of us that judges, a part of us that, you get the point. There will always be things that we're trying to overcome, and to accept that part as the thing inside, that core being that we are caring for, and it will have both negative and positive things, and that the way to overcome and to achieve peace and to achieve joy and happiness and that blissful feeling that can be at the very start of the journey, to have that readily available to you, to have it accessible to you. And one of the ways, like I have a very busy mind. Like I have a super fast processor in here inside my head. And so things like meditation can be difficult for me in the traditional sense, but I've found multiple ways to meditate in a way that fits my personal energy. I will walk. Sometimes I'm listening to cord cutters. Sometimes I'm listening to balancing. Sometimes I'm listening to a root chakra. Sometimes I'm listening to chamber music, quite frankly. Sometimes I'm listening to absolutely nothing, because the thing that I had to do was to be comfortable with being alone with my thoughts and to understand that everybody does actually suffer from intrusive thoughts. Remembering that embarrassing or mortifying thing that you did like 15 years ago, waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and to not be attached to the thought, to just be like, it's kind of weird that that's came up, but you just let it go as being unimportant. Because one of the keys, again, and there are so many keys to this, where if you really start accepting this, your journey will get so much easier, is that a lot of the times the thing that we want is actually about the thing that is hurt within us, and that the key is not the thing that we're wanting, but healing the wound so that we can re-examine what we want. And wanting and desire are interesting things, because as you emerge from the long dark night of the soul, do not be surprised if you have fewer, if like stuff interests you less, or accumulation of things, or the judgments and opinions of others, that like your wants and desires will be more about what would make this experience contain more joy and happiness and the things that we're missing from that long dark night. When the sun comes up on your long dark night, do not be surprised if you are a different version of yourself. And it's like people talk about releasing a former version of yourself. Here is why that always sticks in my craw, is like that former version of me had to get me through so much. And the last thing that I'm ever going to do is abandon that part of me, because wow, what a teeny little soldier of a person that could be. Like I've had a lot, and it wasn't just my childhood. There were a lot of challenges in my adult life as well. And did I make them more difficult? Yes, I did. I played my part. Understanding that part so I can make better choices going forward is another point of this long, difficult examination of self in order to achieve a better understanding of self and others, to find joy and value in life simply for being alive. And there is always something valuable in being alive. And it can be very difficult if you're prone to depressive periods to believe that. And as I was urging people before, if your long dark night of the soul contains thoughts of wishing it all to be over regularly, please see a doctor. And if you can't get to a doctor, here are some keys. And please remember, for legal reasons, I kind of have to disclaim, please remember, I am not a licensed therapist. I am not a doctor, but I am telling you the things that behavioral therapists, I've done as much research as I can. These things reliably help people, but please consult with professionals who have a lot of training, who will be able to help you with that process, but keep yourself informed. That's what this podcast does. That's what so many spiritual healers are trying to do, is add something to your process, but please don't let them define it entirely, because your journey is your own. Here are some things that can greatly help with bringing the long dark night of the soul to an end. Heal yourself through your emotions and understanding that even though it hurts, if you start letting it go and start talking to yourself about, it's over now, I can let go of it, I can feel it and let go of it, that will help. Another part that will help in kind of facilitating the sun coming up is treating your physical body as something that you are caring for. And that does not mean eating clean, which makes food sound like it could be clean or dirty. And it's kind of like food is nourishment, and some is higher value than others. But that there is room in this life for indulgence and for pleasure. And, for like, I don't personally drink any longer. I have a rule that I will only drink to celebrate. But honestly, the last time I had a celebratory drink, I noticed that I was angrier the next day. And I was like, maybe it's not all that great for me. And so I've eschewed that going forward. And will I ever? I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever have another drink or not. I don't personally have addiction in the way that is typically understood, where like I can't control my intake of something. I can quit things like you can't believe, oh my God, my willpower. But what I also do struggle with is I used to run away from my feelings through a variety of overdoing certain things. And sometimes it wasn't substances. Sometimes it was escape into like healthy escapism, reading, and a couple of other things, science fiction. There are healthy forms of escapism, and escapism is not evil. It just cannot become a way of life. There is room within a life for indulgence, but you need to do your work first. So that's what it is, rather than something that you're retreating from your reality with. If you retreat from your reality, then you're not going to have a very good, you're not going to stand a good chance of being in a healthier mindset. You will simply maintain where you are. And some people are perfectly happy there, but if you're in the long, dark night of the soul, there's something there to heal. So limit things that alter your consciousness, and anything that drags you into a darker energy, like alcohol, like most substances. Cannabis has a tendency to be fine, but anything can be overindulged in. If you cannot exercise, and again, check with a doctor about whether or not, because underlying conditions can come forward, make sure that you're engaging in healthy habits like exercise, like movement. Move to the extent that your body can allow you to. That's not to judge. Now, I'm stupid levels of fit. Like, I run up and down stairs. I'm being literal. Like in my apartment, sometimes when I'm lifting, because I have adjustable weights. I got the Power Block weights like years ago. They're the best purchase I ever made, because it means my gym goes wherever I go. I no longer had an exercise machine, but I had a set of stairs. So I started, literally, I will go up and down the stairs for like the 40 minutes at one point, as a singular exercise, but I routinely do 2 sets of 20 minutes of simply going up and down the stairs at a pretty good clip until I am a sweat bath, because that helps turn my energy over and reset my energy. I can do things because of my physical health that I do recommend to others, but remember, everything can be done at the scale that fits for you. So if taking a 15-minute walk after you eat to help process things so you're not dragged down into a lower vibration as your body tries to digest food, then do that. If you can't move well enough to do that, there is no judgment in that, but look into things like chair yoga. Look into the ways that you can, because if you want to make progress, get moving. If you want to, one of the things I've been doing throughout the month of October is posting. I did daily offerings as I tried to help people resolve generational curses and to release generational trauma. And they are really freaking creative. And it made me realize something that I had not realized before, that I've always effortlessly done magic. And in fact, was doing magic the entire time I was married. But my ex-husband never really, I think, tweaked the fact that the way that I cooked was always the thing that, because I never cooked from, I would get recipes and then tweak them. I was always creating. I was always a very creative person. And that was how magical energy kept coming to me, even when I wasn't doing formal spells. Now I do more formal spells. And rediscovering my creativity is one of the things that has been causing me to tap back in to feeling very connected, to feeling more guided, to going forward, to doing what I'm meant to be doing. The long dark night of the soul is so difficult and so sad, but when you embrace it as the thing that will bring you greater happiness and peace and patience are the most beautiful feelings in the world. If you still react to the word patience, have patience with, oh my God, when's this going to be over? When you're ready for it to be over, when you've done the work that you're supposed to do. And that we have this narrative, the societal narrative around aging, that tells us that life and experience and things like falling in love and having friends and all kinds of things have a diminishing worth as we age. No, it does not. It does not. Joy still feels as beautiful when you are when you're over 25 years old, over 35 years old, over 45 years old. It still feels beautiful. Your feelings and your view, all become better, all become more expansive. There is such a point to all of this, and it does suck while you're going through it. But if you tell yourself, I'm going through something difficult so that everything can get better, it will help. If when you become impatient, you start telling yourself, I'm going to choose peace. This is taking the time that it will take. As I said, when I was married and I had a great deal more money, I realized that it did something to my consciousness, to the way I viewed money, that I had never possessed before and I wanted to get rid of. which was the idea that money was to be accumulated and that accumulated money would keep you safe. And I had never had that viewpoint before, and everything always had worked out for me. And I've been trying to examine where it came from, and it definitely came from that marriage and from experiencing having a more comfortable life with trying to relax and trying to be safe, and realizing that I can relax and be safe every single day, that I have enough. And I have enough today, and I will have enough tomorrow. And I'm a fortunate and a blessed person. And I work really hard to try and make sure that things will continue to come to me. And I know in all the ways in which I'm blessed. But that life isn't about things, and life isn't about money. Life is about how you feel about life. And it's that simple. And when you begin to process your life for how do I feel in this moment, and viewing people kindly and viewing them compassionately, that then reflects back at you. If you stop judging another's circumstances by saying they deserve whatever they've got in a negative way, please understand that is a way that you are defending your own life to feel safe. And it's not a judgment, it's just a thing that we do. There are very normal parts of being a human that we have been taught to be ashamed of. And if we will just start viewing it as this is a pretty, and it's not the same thing as giving into it, understanding that it's very normal to be, as a human, to have that, back against the wall, start, killing all and sundry to save my own life. That's a normal part of a survival instinct, but like understanding it and treating it as the destructive force in a life that it is the thing that helps you overcome it and to coexist with it. You're never trying to eradicate parts of yourself. You're trying to integration, coexist with it so that you can have a better experience. And at that point, many people start out in the long dark night of the soul as they go towards their life's purpose. And they can become very bogged down, depressed, and sad in the pace of the journey, not understanding that like part of your purpose is to heal this so that you can perform your purpose at the highest level, and that your soul wants that at such a deep level. That it is your ego that is impatient with the pace. It is your ego that is impatient and wanting and desiring. And that makes ego sound evil. It's not. It is something to learn to coexist with and to put in the proper perspective. And that is what the long dark night of the soul teaches you, is it makes you look into your darkness, to confront it, to see the injuries that you sustained, and then perhaps the poor choices and maybe the crappy things that you've done too, which please stop hiding from them. You don't get a time machine, but if you will look at them and forgive yourself as being, well, that's kind of understandable, but I want to be better than that. It isn't saying that you were inferior, just that you had something to learn. Please stop thinking in terms of superiority and inferiority. Instead, think of yourself as being in a process that will lead you to greater understanding of yourself, that gives you a greater understanding of others, that gives you a greater feeling of resonance within the world. And it will give you peace with all of the terrible things that are in this world, because that's stuff that's just at a different stage in the process. And that if you start combating it in the ways that you can, in trying to heal things and trying to make things better, in trying to connect with others and to feel connected to others. And even if you deeply disagree with somebody, to view whatever hateful thing they might be doing as being from their pain and confusion and darkness, which has no light yet. Understanding that the easiest thing to do to help heal the world is to be the person you were meant to be in it, and to be guided towards the things that you were meant to do. And it is a difficult journey, but why would we undertake that? Because it's important. And that was the thing that finally gave me peace was, as I said, I've had multiple challenging things. I've been very, very, very blessed in others. But the thing that has always stood out to me is that because both of my parents were only children, and because my grandparents died, except for my very long-lived grandmother who lived in a different country, that I essentially had no sense of family. And my God, we live in a society that tells you that family is everything. Now, I do have a son, but he is from my first marriage, and I'm very, very glad that he has siblings and in that marriage. and that he has a very strong sense of family and aunts and uncles and surviving grandparents and a greater sense of connection than I would ever have. I felt very bereft because of that, and being like, I was raised as an only child, even though apparently I have two half brothers. I only knew one of them. My mother had another son who is in Scotland, and my other half brother knows him now, but she placed him for adoption. That I had no family in a world that tells you that family is absolutely everything. Most people do not have the families that they believe that they do, and most people are working from the assumption that they understand the love that is in their life. And that was the thing that started to free me, was understanding that everybody will have moments in their life where they have to examine what they got wrong and what they weren't right about. Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's themselves. And that ultimately, did I really truly believe that I was somebody who at an incorporeal stage would have chosen like a path that it's like, well, that was a messy journey on certain points. Why would you have ever chosen that? And I accepted that it's like, well, would I have done that if I thought it would help other people? If I could get to a stage in my life where I could help other people get through their pain more quickly so they didn't have to suffer, is that, yeah. And it's not because I'm some great human being. It's just like, no, that's been a core belief I've always had, is that we really should try and help each other. So that makes perfect sense. It's the one thing that has never ever changed about me, is that like, that's my, that is my defining truth. And when I accepted that, it was a lot easier to look at all of the things in my life as lessons to learn about myself and to help others learn about themselves. And part of the reason I do this, and part of the reason that I examine well-known constructs to talk about them from a different perspective, is that we lose a sense of meaning with repetition. There is an assumption of certain things when something is repeated over and over again, that there is a deeper understanding of the building blocks or the material of which something is made, and there isn't. And people find themselves incredibly emotionally bereft in the long, dark night of the soul. If you are in that space, listen to me. It will get better. It can get better. There is no pain that you cannot heal from. You can heal your pain. You can find your joy. You can find your love. You can find your connection. And will it be a romantic love? Maybe, if that's important to you, but stop putting too much weight on that, because it gives your happiness, the quality of your life, to another person who has all their own stuff to do. But you can find love of so many things, and it will be as good and even better, because it will be something that cannot ever be taken from you by the decisions of another person, but will be completely within your power. And when you get to that point, you will have access to all of the gifts that are meant to come to you, and you will have cleared generational trauma and generational curses, which is the exact same thing, pretty much. But the heart of a generational curse is a wrongdoing that unfortunately most of us have participated in. If you live on land that was stolen, and most of us do, and I'm not just talking about the United States, it's literally a condition across the globe, and likely it was cursed by the people from whom it was taken, which is completely understandable. And curse does not mean vengeance. It means you got to learn. Let these people learn. And so some of the things that we carry forward about the things that we're trying to learn. There is nothing in an emotional capacity that will fail to get better if you put in some work on it. And there is a point. And even when it lasts, there are bright days, and then there are dark days. And there may be setbacks, and there may be false starts, and like, I have arrived. Whenever you find yourself thinking it's done, it's over, I'm done, there's usually something more. When it actually seems to be over is when you accept what is meant for me is coming to me, and that may include my lessons. That may include the things that I need to learn how to reprioritize to have a better experience. Because that's really what the whole releasing materialism is about. It's not about being better than people who have stuff, but rather, because nobody's better than another person. We're just at different stages in a journey. It's to know more peace and to really know what you value in your life and what levels of comfort you need. And the things that will keep body and soul together, but your soul working in conjunction with your divine self to do what you came here to do, so that this experience can become a beautiful and informative and magical experience when you realize how everything truly is connected, and that all we have to do is look for the threads. And when you're in the long dark night of the soul, it can feel so dark. And that thing that I have on my website, that thing I've shared before, the thing that I am positive saved my life, because I'm never kidding when I'm talking about how people with my background, if I'd been a male, it would not have been unusual for me to have ended up a serial killer or a sociopath. And that is the truth. That is the level of trauma that was contained within my childhood. Neither happened to me. And it is because part of what I read as a child, because I was a voracious reader, was a book called Follow the Leader that contained the sentence, "It is better to light a single candle than to sit and curse the dark." And it is better to light that single candle, to look for the thread, for the meaning, for what it was trying to teach you rather than what was trying to hurt you. It is better to find the light in the darkness, even if it's just a little flickering thing. If you take care of it, if you go towards it, if you accept that some wounds are pretty deep and they might take a while to heal, but that it is never too late to have a beautiful and a happy life. No matter what society tells you about the number you inhabit, it is never too late. This has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica, and that was Surviving the Long Dark Night of the Soul. I hope you found it helpful. If you want to book me for a life coaching session or a tarot reading, you can find me at therisingmoon.com. You can find me on my YouTube channel at cronecast at the rising moon. The thing I really want to leave people with is that every night ends. Just get through it and reach out where you need to, and never be afraid of going towards help, and never be afraid of going towards multiple forms of it, because you may find answers in many different places. Take care. Be well. The light's returning.